I knew it was over the second Chase stapled a laminated safety is sexy poster over the federal compliance wall. He didn't even line it up, just slapped it on there crooked like a toddler hanging macaroni art. The edges curled under the fluorescent lights while our actual OSHA log, required by law, got yanked off and left face down on my desk like a dead fish. That log had 9 years of spotless inspection history, signed in triplicate, timestamped, verified, and filed under both cloud and hard copy. But sure, Chase had a new vision. Said binders were boomer clutter and safety walkthroughs were morale killers. I bit my tongue so hard it left a crescent in the side of my cheek. You ever watch a man with a business degree and zero forklift clearance unplug a floor sensor because the blinking makes him anxious? That was my Tuesday. The following Thursday, he replaced our lockout tagout tags with color-coded buddy bands he ordered off Etsy. Apparently, hot pink means do not touch unless vibes are immaculate. Now listen, before we get any deeper into this hell ride, do me a favor. If you're listening and even half entertained by this chaos, tap that subscribe button and throw a like on this. It really keeps the team going over here. Document stories like Chase's, so you know you're not alone in working for a sentient can of Axe body spray with Wi-Fi. Anyway, let's go back to when I still had hope. When I first got hired, our office was 3 rooms above a plumbing distributor, and the closest thing we had to policy was a crusty microwave with a melted Tupperware lid stuck inside. Over the years, I built us out of that. I wrote the protocols. I negotiated fire inspection pathways, handled air quality checks, trained every single manager on emergency procedures, and even got our first clean federal site audit without a single strike. My binders, literal binders, were legend. Index tabs, thermal laminated incident logs, multilingual signage, you name it. I kept us compliant, clean, and off every damn radar that could fine us into oblivion. But success gets boring to some people, especially when their daddy's the CEO, and they think safety is just a cute little checkbox on the investor deck. Chase blew in like Axe and Mountain Dew had a baby and gave it a LinkedIn profile. His resume was a 3-page color brochure with words like disruption and energy ninja. And in the middle of a Monday all hands, the CEO, my CEO, announced Chase would be joining as Director of Operational Excellence, which somehow included safety, compliance, training, morale oversight, translation, my job, all of it. They called it a transition. Said I'd be advisory now, helping Chase integrate our legacy systems with his new vision. It felt like being asked to help euthanize your own dog. I sat through the meeting with my face frozen in a polite grimace while Chase nodded like a bobblehead and said, "I'm all about good vibes and fast pivots." The first week was bearable. He asked dumb questions. I gave straight answers. He ignored them, that's normal corporate decay. But then he started deleting things. Whole spreadsheets gone. Archived reports wiped. Told IT that version control is for people who fear the future. I found our emergency evacuation maps replaced with one-pagers labeled "Where's the Party?" featuring QR codes that linked to Spotify playlists. I wish I were kidding. The fire marshal did not enjoy Lizzo Midovac. By week 2, Chase stopped asking anything. I was moved to a small side office with no windows and no printer access. My official title was changed from Safety and Compliance Manager to Legacy Integration Specialist, which sounds like something from a dystopian nursing home. Chase referred to me as the archive lady in meetings. There's a humiliation that doesn't scream, it just settles over you like damp insulation. People started walking past me without saying hi. Slack messages dried up. My access permissions quietly changed. The guy from accounting called me Miss Maria like I was somebody's retired aunt visiting for lunch. I didn't protest. I didn't go to HR. I didn't storm into the CEO's office demanding answers. That's not how you survive in a place like this. No, I stayed polite. I stayed quiet, and I watched. Because Chase wasn't just sloppy. He was reckless in the way only rich kids can afford to be. And when someone like that gets handed power they didn't earn, especially power with liability attached, well, let's just say I started printing things, lots of things. The first binder he burned, figuratively, though I don't put it past him to try a literal match, was our confined space entry log. Years of permits, air quality readings, attendant signatures, and follow-ups gone. He opened the cabinet, pulled out the fat green binder like it was radioactive, and held it up during his town hall reboot meeting like it was a Bible he was about to ban. This, he said, pacing in front of the staff like a deranged youth pastor, is why our culture feels heavy. This binder is trauma. People laughed nervously. Chase thrived on nervous laughter. He fed on it like a swamp mosquito. Next came the signage. Out went the legally mandated laminated placards that said things like caution, high voltage, or do not operate without training. In came color-coded murals printed on foam core board with pastel fonts and slogans like Spark Joy, not Sparks, and Buzz Safe, not Sorry. I walked past one taped to the welding bay entrance and stared at it so long one of the floor guys asked if I was okay. I think it gave me a stroke, I said, or maybe just a premonition. But the real gut punch came Thursday morning. I showed up in steel-toe boots, ready for our monthly walkthrough, the one where we check guardrails, emergency exits, and machine lockouts before anyone clocks in. Standard, routine, essential. The warehouse lights were already on. People were working. The checklist was still on my desk. Chase came up behind me holding a protein smoothie and said, "Yeah, I canceled that. Big morale killer." Moving toward a self-accountability model, trust-based safety. Trust, I repeated, blinking. Instead of verifying, he grinned. Exactly, you get it. That was the moment I knew. Knew this wasn't just a kid with dumb ideas. This was a walking, talking insurance liability with hair gel, and I had just been forced to hand him the keys to the factory and pray he didn't drive it into a school. The next day I got the email. Subject line, reorg update. Read like a bad breakup text. I was being relocated to the administrative floor to better leverage legacy knowledge systems in a synergistic support role. My badge no longer scanned for the warehouse entrance. My new desk was next to the copier, across from accounts payable, sandwiched between two motivational posters from 2006 that said things like "teamwork makes the dream work" in Comic Sans. No one said anything to my face. Not Chase, not the CEO, not even Janice from HR, who once asked me for help removing a wasp from her Prius. I was just moved like a chair, like a filing cabinet someone forgot to throw away but didn't want to deal with. The worst part? The silence. No more pre-shift huddles. No more reports to sign. No more being copied on safety memos because Chase had decided all internal documentation would now live on something he called the Vibe Drive, a Google folder with no folders. Just a mess of PDFs with names like Cool Forklift Rules, Final 2, PDF and Emergency Plan Maria, but Fun PPTX. I started getting CC-ed on accident reports that had no signatures, no timestamps, just half-filled Google forms that said things like "worker tripped on cord maybe?" and loud bang. All good now? One day I opened the Vibe Drive and found a photo of a guy standing inside a scissor lift with a margarita emoji sticker pasted over the missing guardrail. The file name was Lift Life JPG. It had been uploaded by Chase. I forwarded it to legal. I didn't add a comment. I didn't need to. See, this is where Chase thought he was winning. He thought I was out of the picture, sidelined, minimized, defanged. What he didn't realize is that I'd built the bones of that company. Every inspection passed under my watch. Every form, every policy, every code mine. And I don't delete things. I don't purge binders. I don't lose track of dates. So while Chase was out giving motivational talks to the interns about safety through empowerment, I was quietly building a secondary record, screenshots, printouts, even hand copying notes when he disabled my cloud access. I started printing accident photos and slipping them into a fresh binder labeled for future litigation. I made backup drives. I emailed documents to myself. I kept timestamps, IP logs, and a running tally of every removed procedure. I even sent a manila envelope to my sister out in Akron, just in case, because I could feel the pressure building, like steam in a pipe with the valve rusted shut. Chase wasn't trimming fat. He was sawing through the bones of our infrastructure with a butter knife. And nobody, not the board, not the investors, not even his daddy, seemed to notice. Not yet, but they would. You need a certified LODO procedure before you can legally, I started, standing in the doorway of his office, holding the updated lockout/tagout forms he never signed. Chase didn't even look up. He was reclined in his chair, tossing a baseball in the air like a Wall Street villain in a made-for-TV movie. His office smelled like Axe body spray and kale chips. On his desk sat a smoothie, a cracked iPad, and a whiteboard with the words "Think BIG//move fast// no fear" scrawled in all caps, underlined 3 times. He caught the baseball, spun it in his palm, and said, "Maria, go alphabetize something." I stood there for a beat, maybe 2, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I suddenly realized there was nothing left to say. Nothing that would land. Nothing that wouldn't bounce right off the invisible force field that surrounded Chase, the one made of nepotism, entitlement, and delusion. So I nodded, just once, and I walked out. That was the last time I warned him. From that moment on, I stopped pushing, stopped reminding, stopped advising, started documenting. He called it cutting red tape at the next board meeting, said he'd unclogged the arteries of bureaucracy. I was there, sitting off to the side like a potted plant no one had watered since February, scribbling notes into a notepad I didn't plan to share. I didn't speak. I didn't even blink when he said he'd streamlined compliance into a self-correcting ecosystem. Self-correcting. I wrote that down. When the CFO asked if Chase had consulted legacy stakeholders, meaning me, Chase flashed that politician grin and said, "Oh, Maria's still here. She's just in a supportive orbit now." That got a laugh from the CEO. One of those stiff fake dad laughs that ends in a cough. Later that day, I found my credentials removed from the compliance server. No access, no alert, just a blank screen and a loading wheel spinning like a toilet flush, so I built my own. I started printing every file I could still reach, taking screenshots, exporting emails. If it even smelled like a violation, it went in a folder. I color-coded by risk level, labeled everything with timestamps. I even made a spreadsheet mapping removed signage dates to any reported floor incidents. When my access to the HR log vanished, I began taking daily photos of the breakroom whiteboard, which listed who was on site, useful for when someone inevitably got injured and the buddy system Chase promised turned out to be a rotating cast of undertrained temps. I bought a personal scanner. I backed everything up to a private drive. I encrypted that drive. Twice. I wrote down every time someone asked me a safety question I wasn't allowed to answer. One day a floor lead asked, "Do we still need to do air checks before going under the mezzanine tanks?" I told him to ask Chase. He noted the date, time, and exact words. Another day, a new warehouse tech said, "Hey, didn't this used to have a checklist for forklift battery replacement?" I just nodded, then added his name to my log. There's a certain calm that comes after the storm of betrayal. Not peace, no, not that, but a kind of internal stillness. Like when you finally accept someone isn't going to change and you stop trying to save them. You just start preparing for the inevitable crash. Chase was moving fast, too fast. New machines installed without updated permits. Old machines still listed as decommissioned, despite being in daily use. Emergency exits blocked during a product launch photo shoot because the lighting was better that way. He even had someone paint over the directional floor arrows because they clashed with the branding palette. Every move he made was a countdown. And I watched it like I used to watch pressure gauges in the old boiler room. Needle creeping higher, warning lights flickering, and nobody listening. He thought silence meant obedience, but sometimes silence is just the sound of a trapdoor being built under your chair. By the end of the month, I had a full binder labeled Discrepancies Chase Era. I kept it in my bottom drawer under a layer of untouched onboarding brochures. No one knew it was there. I made a duplicate and stored it in my trunk. I mailed a third copy, sealed and notarized, to my cousin who works in municipal code enforcement. She doesn't open anything unless I tell her. It's just insurance. Let the boy smirk in his meetings. Let him mock the rules. Let him empower the warehouse with Instagram polls and Slack emojis. I wasn't stopping him anymore. I was just keeping the receipts. It was buried in a calendar invite, one of those old recurring ones from before Chase's vibe-driven ops system replaced everything with Slack polls and vibes-based scheduling. Quarterly safety walkthrough, originally scheduled for Thursday at 9 o'clock a.m. A mandatory inspection we'd passed every time under my watch. The kind of visit that, if you skip it or flub it, could land you in a federal spreadsheet labeled high-risk entity. I looked it over 3 times, just to be sure, and I scrolled through Chase's email history in the shared inbox archive. Nothing. No reschedule notice, no prep memo, no vendor clearance forms, no notification to legal. The inspector's name was still in the calendar event, and the day was tomorrow. I stared at that screen for a long while. Then quietly I opened a fresh manila envelope. Inside it went printouts of the last 6 weeks' worth of policy removals, accident logs with missing witness fields, email where Chase literally typed IDK, remove that field if it's too long, and screenshots of Slack exchanges where he responded to serious injury alerts with emojis. On top of the stack, I placed a high-res photo of the new warehouse floor plan Chase had debuted at his last board presentation, the one where he photoshopped out 2 aging hydraulic lifts that still operated daily, despite their tags being expired by over a year. I sealed the envelope, labeled it with my home address in my own handwriting, and added a little sticky note: if unopened by July, discard. If I'm fired before July, give to Lauren. Lauren's my neighbor, retired postmaster, trusts no one. Then I mailed it. The next day I came in early expecting to be on edge, but I wasn't. I was calm, almost bored. I'd reached that weird zone where you're not scared of consequences anymore because you've already lost the thing that mattered. My role, my respect. My ability to actually do the job. So when I walked past Chase that morning and said, "Inspection still happening?" I wasn't testing him. I was curious what flavor of lie he'd go with. He blinked, mouth full of protein bar, and said, "Oh, I canceled that. We're doing something way more high impact." I tilted my head. Which is. He grinned like a man who just ordered the most expensive bottle on the menu. Investor safety tour. Gotta show him how tight we run things. I blinked. The one scheduled during an unpermitted shift, he smirked. They don't know what permits look like, Maria. They're here for the vibe. Plus, I got matching hard hats with our new logo. Orange, but like millennial orange. I walked away. At 11 o'clock a.m., a Sprinter van pulled into the lot. 4 suits and tailored blazers got out, trailed by a junior associate with an iPad and Chase's marketing intern with a gimbal camera for content capture. Chase emerged from the building like a cruise director on methamphetamines, high-fived the investor guy with the man bun, offered CBD gummies to the older one in orthopedic loafers. Inside, the machines were running, not test mode running, active, conveyor belts humming, forklifts moving pallets, welders arcing sparks off rusted steel with no containment curtains. I stood by the supply closet pretending to re-inventory microfiber towels. One of the newer hires, a kid named Eric who still buttoned his shirt all the way up, walked over to where I was holding a clipboard and whispered, isn't this, like, illegal?" I didn't look up. I just nodded, once. He shifted his weight, looked back at the floor. So, what do I do? I closed the closet. Your goggles, keep your logs. Don't sign anything you didn't write. He nodded, quietly terrified. That kind of terror that only shows up when you realize the people in charge have no brakes and no map and think gravity is just a suggestion. From the break room window, I watched Chase give his investor guests a tour of the welding floor. One of them pointed toward a machine with the clearance sticker missing. Chase waved it off like he was swatting a fly. Behind him, someone tripped over a half-unloaded pallet. Caught themselves. No one noticed. Afterward, Chase posted a photo to the company's Slack. Him and the investors in hard hats, caption safety is sexy, smiling flexed, hash culture, hash future ready, hash no limits. I saved the image, dated it, printed 2 copies. He thought the tour went great. I thought it was a funeral dress rehearsal. It happened on a Wednesday, the kind of day that hums with static, quiet, tense, like the building itself knows something's about to snap. A floor tech named Gerald was replacing a coolant line on one of the older stamping presses when the pressure valve began to hiss. Not the normal kind of hiss. The kind that means get the hell back and shut it down now. He reached for the emergency stop switch, but the new laminated guide hanging by the panel had been simplified by Chase's team. It said to pull the lever. So Gerald pulled the lever. The lever wasn't connected to the emergency shutoff anymore. That had been removed in the last optimization, when Chase decided the wiring was confusing and had a contractor reroute everything, without updating the documentation. The correct shutoff was now a floor button, painted the same beige as the tile. Gerald didn't know. He wasn't trained. Chase said walkthroughs were legacy overkill. By the time the backup tech ran over and hit the floor kill switch, coolant had sprayed across half the bay and shorted out one of the sensors near the mezzanine stairs. Nobody was injured, thank God. But the smell, acrid and bitter, hung in the air for hours. The cleanup took all afternoon, and no one from safety ever came by, because there was no safety department anymore. Just me. Somewhere upstairs, next to the copier. I didn't even hear about it until someone left an unsigned note in my desk drawer. You need to see what happened on line B today. No name, just that one sentence. So I pulled the camera logs, cross-referenced time stamps, watched the slow-motion catastrophe frame by frame, the hiss, the confusion, the lever, the nothing. I documented it all, saved every second, labeled the footage, printed the floor panel photos, added them to the binder. Then I just sat there for a moment, listening to the hum of the copy machine behind me and wondering how long this place had left before it made the news. The next morning, I got an HR calendar invite. Check-in, anonymous concern. It was already on my schedule. No confirmation needed. In the room, Janice from HR, her fake concerned smile locked into place like Botox, and a guy I'd never seen before from legal, who wore a suit 2 sizes too tight and blinked too often. Hi Maria, Janice chirped. Thanks for coming in. There's been a little incident on the floor and your name came up. Nothing serious, we just want to make sure everyone feels heard. I said nothing, just looked at her. Legal cleared his throat. There's been an anonymous concern filed regarding documentation practices related to floor equipment procedures. Specifically, whether outdated signage or training may have contributed to operational confusion. That was rich. They were fishing, trying to see if I'd claim ownership of documents I hadn't approved in months, if I'd admit to anything that made me look culpable. I knew this game. I wrote the damn rules for it back when our legal compliance actually meant something. So I leaned forward, folded my hands, and said, my last approved procedures are dated 6 months ago. All changes since then were made without my sign-off. I've kept copies of the originals for reference if needed. Janice smiled tighter. Legal scribbled something. I left before they could pivot the blame any harder, and that's when I knew Chase was sweating. Because 30 minutes later, he pulled me into his office for the first time in weeks. Hey Maria, he said, voice high and fake. Let's catch up. I stepped inside, eyes already scanning the disaster zone of his desk. Empty protein bar wrappers, a sticky note that said blame equals strategy, and what looked like a half-written flowchart titled Crisis equals Opportunity. He gestured for me to sit. I didn't. So listen, he said, standing up and pacing like he was rehearsing a TED talk that nobody asked for. There's been a little drama on the floor. Someone got nervous. People love to panic when they don't understand the big picture. You know how it is. I stared at him. He laughed. It's not like anyone got hurt. We're fine, totally fine, but like, if anything did happen, God forbid, you've got my back, right? Silence. Then I smiled, small, cold. You're the named safety officer, Chase. He blinked. Yeah, of course, he said, waving his hand. But I mean internally we're a team, right? Like you helped build all this. I tilted my head. Exactly. I built it. He didn't like that. I could see it in the twitch behind his eyes. Wanted reassurance. He wanted a scapegoat with a maternal tone and a clipboard. He wanted me to say yes. I said nothing else. He sat down slowly, suddenly unsure of himself for the first time since he'd swaggered through that front door with his $1,000 shoes and 20-cent experience. I walked out of the office, quiet, unbothered. Back at my desk, I opened the binder and added a new section, Direct Conversations CYA Requests. Labeled, dated, cross-referenced. The fuse was burning low now. And the silence? It was starting to smell like smoke. There's a rhythm to collapse if you listen closely enough. It's not loud, not dramatic, just the soft tick of overdue permits, the hollow thump of skipped procedures, the dry rustle of forms never filed. Chase didn't hear it. He was too busy setting off confetti cannons labeled innovation wins and high-fiving interns for disrupting risk culture. But I heard it. I counted every beat. It started with the tank pressure clearance forms. I pulled them up one night while pretending to update vendor contacts. Expired, not just one but six. Two of them had lapsed over 4 months ago, which in this industry might as well be a handwritten invitation for the feds to come kick your door in. I traced them backward. Saw the signatures missing, approvals missing, not even a note, just blank cells in a spreadsheet with a fake timestamp. Chase had replaced our approval flow with something called Fast Track, a glorified Google form with no chain of custody, no validation, no audit trail. It was, in short, criminally stupid, so I began, one file at a time, one screenshot at a time, permit expirations, machine certifications, bypassed lockout clearances, inspection deferrals never rescheduled, contractor access logs erased without cause, new SOPs that referenced non-existent safety devices like virtual hazard cones. Everything went into the master folder I called the ARC. No cloud, no shared drive, just local, encrypted, and quiet. Then I printed. I printed until the office supply order flag went off and procurement emailed me asking if I really needed more toner. I did. I needed all the toner. I made 3 full copies, one sealed in a waterproof case and hidden in a storage bin in my trunk, beneath a picnic blanket and a fake tote labeled dog toys. The second slid inside a campus mailing envelope, unmarked, and dropped into the legal department's internal mail slot on a Thursday afternoon, time-stamped and camera captured by the hallway security feed I knew still worked. The third I took home. I opened the fireproof lockbox under my bed, where I kept my passport and the letter from my mother I hadn't reread in 10 years, and I slid the files in alongside a flash drive labeled Do Not Plug into Work PC. I placed a sticky note on the top, in case of termination or explosion. Then I cleaned my desk, deleted my Slack history, removed personal photos, took down the poster that said compliance is not optional because clearly it was, and the irony was starting to make me itch. And I submitted my PTO request. 5 days, no reason given, just a gap in the noise. I scheduled it to auto-send at 3:17 p.m., right in the middle of Chase's next-gen Vision Sync board meeting, the one he hyped up all week with teaser emails and memes of a bald eagle wearing sunglasses. Apparently he kicked it off with a bang. Literally, a pop of champagne, balloons, some poor intern dressed as a safety cone. He stood at the front of the conference room and I'm told declared with both arms raised like a pastor at a tent revival, we're 100% audit ready. Any day, any time. Bring it on. There was applause. Someone whistled. He passed around branded keychains that said Safe AF and unveiled a slideshow with metrics that had more emojis than numbers. I was already gone. Sitting in my car in the employee lot, engine running, windows down, binder on the passenger seat like a silent co-pilot. The copy in the back was tucked away under the fake tote, and I had the third one at home, sealed and dated. I didn't look back, didn't need to. Chase had built himself a stage. He just didn't realize the spotlight came from a fuse. They came on a Monday. Not with sirens or searchlights, no, that would have been too kind. The federal inspector walked through the front doors like a man asking for the manager at a hardware store, clipboard in hand, windbreaker zipped, a laminated badge that made the receptionist choke on her gum. He didn't ask for directions. He gave them. I'm here for an unannounced facility compliance audit. The lobby went quiet. At that exact moment, Chase was upstairs setting up a ring light. He'd scheduled a live stream for Safety Culture Week, and the theme of the day was empowered environments. Trust over checklists. Ironic timing, considering the inspector walked past our now bare compliance wall, which used to host the official OSHA postings, but had since been replaced with a poster of a cat clinging to a lightning bolt, with the caption hang in their safety is a vibe. I wasn't at my desk when the inspector arrived. I was across the street, sitting on the patio of a diner that sells bacon so greasy it comes with its own zip code. My PTO technically ended that morning, but I hadn't logged back in. I was sipping black coffee, binder in my passenger seat, phone face down. I wasn't trying to hide. I just didn't need to be early, because I knew what was coming. By 9:08 a.m., I got the first call, then another, then an urgent text from Janice in HR asking if I was on site. I ignored all of them, not out of spite, just timing. You don't interrupt a souffle while it's rising. At 9:31 a.m., I walked through the glass doors of the building I'd helped keep alive for nearly a decade. No badge swipe needed, someone held the door open without thinking. People were whispering. The floor buzzed with the kind of nervous static you feel before a tornado hits. Chase was already in the boardroom, legal on one side of him, the CFO on the other. His smile was too wide, like he hadn't yet decided whether this was a drill or a dream. The inspector was flipping through a printed report, one of mine, the original version. I'm going to need to speak to the named safety officer, he said flatly. Chase perked up. That's me, he said, practically bouncing in his ergonomic chair. Been in the role since Q2. We've been proactively evolving our compliance model, leaner, faster, trust-based. Inspector raised one eyebrow, unimpressed. He turned a page. We received a detailed whistleblower submission including altered procedures, expired permits, falsified training logs, and missing SOP signatures. Is that part of your trust-based model, Mr. Dennings? Legal shifted in their seat. CFO looked down. Chase laughed too loudly. Okay, whoa, let's all take a deep breath. This is probably just a miscommunication. We've had some, legacy friction with outdated logs. Nothing criminal, nothing dangerous. That's when I walked in. I wasn't wearing a badge. I didn't have a clipboard. Just a ceramic mug that said "Not today," Satan, and a small manila folder tucked under my arm. Maria, Chase said, visibly startled, voice lifting half an octave. You're here, the inspector didn't flinch. And you are? Maria Alvarez, I said, setting the coffee down. 9-year veteran of this organization, former safety and compliance manager. The inspector's eyes didn't leave me. You submitted the whistleblower file? I submitted the facts, I replied. What they do with them is up to your office. Chase half stood. Okay, hold on. We don't need a circus here, the inspector cut him off. Mr. Dennings, I will now be conducting a walkthrough of the facility. You will remain present. Legal counsel may observe but may not interfere. Miss Alvarez, I'd like you to accompany us. Beat past, 2. Legal opened their mouth to object. The inspector opened his badge wallet. That ended the discussion. The walk began. Past the shortcut Chase had carved through a gated area, now marked with a paper sign that read "Shortcut Zone Walk with Purpose." Past the safety eyewear cabinet that had been converted into a wellness corner featuring essential oils and a whiteboard of positive affirmations. Past the shutoff valve now labeled with a sticker that said, "In Comic Sans, just breathe, bro." The inspector scribbled, photographed, asked no questions. Chase sweated. I stayed silent. My heartbeat didn't spike. My hands didn't shake. I didn't need revenge. I needed accuracy. And accuracy was taking notes in real time. By noon, we were back in the boardroom. The inspector set down his clipboard with the calm finality of a judge reaching a verdict. We'll reconvene shortly. I suggest you locate the original documents related to your last 12 months of procedural updates. Chase stammered something about digital logs and innovation hubs. The inspector turned to me. Miss Alvarez, would you happen to know where we might begin? I smiled, reached into my folder, and handed him a printed index. Page 1 is labeled after I was told to alphabetize something. You'll find everything after that pretty straightforward. And with that, I took my coffee and left the room. There was nothing more to say. The fuse had burned down. The fire had started. The inspector returned at 3:07 p.m. Not that anyone was counting, but I was. The boardroom had been refitted in a panic, legal pads stacked, pitchers of filtered water. Someone had even attempted a fruit plate, as if strawberries might soften the blow of a federal violation. Chase was already seated, flanked again by legal and the CFO, who now looked like someone had slipped them a live grenade and whispered, "Hold this till I say duck." I didn't sit. I stood near the windows, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching storm clouds roll in. Outside, a truck was idling too long near the loading bay, another violation if the inspector happened to look. He didn't, he was focused. When he walked in, he carried a black leather folio, closed, heavy. No smiles, no pleasantries, just this quiet gravity like the air had thickened by 2 degrees. He pulled a document from the folio and set it on the table. The seal in the corner caught the light. It was our safety readiness certification, the one filed for Chase's investor tour. The one that claimed we were 100% compliant across all federally regulated operations. The one with my name at the bottom, my signature. Except, it wasn't. Mr. Dennings, the inspector said, voice even. You confirm that this is the certification your office submitted to the Department of Industrial Operations on the 15th? Chase's smile twitched. Yes, that's the file we submitted, all accurate to the best of our knowledge. Good, the inspector replied, sliding it an inch forward. Then I'd like you to confirm who authorized this document. Chase's eyes flicked to the bottom. My name, a perfect little PNG replica of my signature. Maria Alvarez, he said, Legacy Compliance Manager. She signed off before she left for PTO. I didn't flinch. I just stepped forward, set my folder on the table, and slowly opened it. Inside was the original. No signature, no timestamp. The seal space left blank. Filed, yes, but never approved. I laid it next to Chase's copy like a photo of a newborn beside a forged birth certificate. This, I said, tapping the original, is the unaltered version, the one I was asked to review, and refused to sign. It lacks required documentation, omits 3 open violations, and includes false reporting about emergency training completion. I noted my objections. I emailed them. I archived them. All dated and backed up. Legal leaned forward, voice thin. Where is this copy stored? Whose system houses the original file? I sent a hard copy to Legal's internal mailbox the same day the fake was submitted, I replied. Check your interoffice intake logs. Timestamped. Security camera above the mail slot will show the delivery. And the drive it was created on, that's registered to my personal compliance account, revoked access as of June 8th. The inspector didn't even blink. He turned to legal. Do you confirm this timeline? The company lawyer went pale, stared at the document like it had teeth. Finally, he nodded once. It was the slowest, saddest nod I've ever seen, like someone realizing they'd left the stove on after a 2-week vacation. Chase was sweating now, beads forming at his temples, shirt dampening under the arms. He leaned forward, trying that awful used car salesman voice he relied on whenever he felt the room slipping. This is a misunderstanding, he said. We needed the document for the tour. Maria was on vacation. We used a placeholder file just to keep things moving. I turned to him. My voice was level. Like a scalpel. You used my digital signature without consent. That's forgery under both internal policy and federal regulation. There's no placeholder clause for committing fraud. Chase. He opened his mouth again, closed it, looked at legal. Legal didn't look back. The inspector spoke, tone glacial. Submitting falsified federal compliance documentation with a forged signature carries civil penalties and potential criminal charges, especially when paired with willful negligence of known violations. You've acknowledged authorship. You've confirmed chain of custody. We will be proceeding. He stood, collected both documents, slipped them into his folio, then he turned to me. Miss Alvarez, thank you for your assistance. You've been more than cooperative. I nodded once, not out of pride, not even relief, just finality. The kind that hums in your bones when the weight finally shifts off your back and onto someone else's chest. As the inspector exited, Chase stood frozen, lips parted like he wanted to scream but hadn't picked a vowel yet. Legal gathered their papers without a word. The CFO just stared at the table like it might split open and swallow them whole. And I walked to the side of the room, picked up my mug, took one last sip. Then I turned to the window. The first crack of thunder rolled in from the hills. The storm had arrived. The room felt vacuum-sealed. Not quiet, compressed. The air had weight. The kind that settles behind your eyes and presses down on your lungs. The inspector stood still at the head of the boardroom table, folio now closed, fingers laced over the leather cover like a judge awaiting the silence that follows a gavel. Chase, perhaps thinking the worst had already passed, sat upright again. He even tried to smile. That arrogant, frat boy smirk curling just slightly at the corners like he thought we were winding down toward leniency. Like the worst-case scenario was a strongly worded email and a slap on the wrist. The inspector looked directly at him. Mr. Dennings, he said, you are the named safety officer of record for this facility, correct? Chase nodded. Yes, he said with casual confidence, like he was confirming a brunch reservation. That's me. The inspector's expression didn't change, but the tone shifted, hard and sharp as an ice pick. Then you'll be addressed directly. Pause. We're issuing an immediate $2.8 million noncompliance penalty to the company, pending further criminal investigation into the forged safety certification documents submitted under your name. Additional sanctions may apply following forensic review of internal communications and facility logs. Chase didn't react at first. I think the words took a second to register, like a distant thunderclap still rolling its way toward his ears. Then came the twitch, the eye flicker, the way his jaw flexed as if his body was trying to reboot into a version of himself that had an answer. But there was none. Across the table, the CFO dropped her pen. Legal exhaled, slow and shallow, like they were practicing not to vomit. And the CEO, the man who put Chase in that chair, who shoved me to the sidelines, who applauded every buzzword that replaced real work, he made a sound. A short, sharp inhale that never released. It wasn't a gasp, not a word, just the biological reflex of someone who's just realized they've let a toddler drive a freight train and the bridge is already out. His hand moved to his chest. He leaned back in his chair, face gone bone-white. Breathing, halted. No one moved to help him. The inspector slid the signed document across the table to legal. You'll receive formal notice of review and penalties by close of business. I advise you to locate counsel specializing in federal compliance fraud. Good day. Then he turned and walked out, just like that. No raised voice, no dramatics, just the final swing of a blade so sharp it didn't bleed until the echo faded. I was still seated at the far end of the boardroom, legs crossed, fingers loosely wrapped around my glass of water. I hadn't spoken. I didn't need to. I took one last sip, set the glass down gently, and I said softly, almost kindly, like a grandmother offering a recipe, I told you, overkill is what keeps people alive. Chase didn't move. The CEO didn't speak. The silence that followed wasn't shock. It wasn't confusion. It was the kind of silence people make when they realize the lights are still on. But the house is already burning. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit him.